Well, hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Interesting one today, friends, as we watch Star Trek, the original series, Season 2, Episode 15, The Trouble with Tribbles. I know what a tribble is. This is one of the very few items that I knew about before starting my journey on Star Trek, the original series. So I'm very excited to see what all the hubbub's about and really get into what is a tribble and why are there trouble with them. Whatever. Friends, if you could do me a huge favor, hit that like button, smash that subscribe, ring that bell for notifications. You'll be alerted next time we go live with the original series of Star Trek or any of our sci-fi fare. And of course, if there's anything that we do that you would like early or in its full-length format, the link to the Patreon's in the description. But all that is then, friends, and this is now. And now it's time for what I would consider to be, since I know about it, one of the iconic episodes of Star Trek, the original series, as we watch Season 2, Episode 15, The Trouble with Tribbles. Prepare to engage maximum warp reaction. And away we go. Look at that beauty. Again, whenever I started watching the original series, there was a couple episodes that I knew about. Space Seed, because of Khan, and that's all I knew about it. Khan was in it. Mirror Mirror, I knew about that simply because of the Mirror Universe. I knew nothing about the episode, though. And Trouble with Tribbles, because of the Tribbles. And for some reason, I know what those are. And this is where it all started, I guess. So I'm interested. For me, that knows nothing about the original series other than what we've watched together. It's an interesting one because I like coming across these ones that I knew about before. And usually, like with Space Seed, I had an opinion going in and an opinion coming out. Not that it was worse or anything. It was just very different than what I expected. And so I'm curious to see if this has the same type of trajectory. We'll see it. Let's get ready. Who do we got? Who's our writer? Who's our director? David Gerald. Joseph Pevney. He's tired, everybody. Joe is very, very tired.
More than an emergency, it signals near or total disaster. We can only assume the Klingons...
Wow, slow down, everybody.
We're going in armed for battle.
Men phasers armed and ready, sir.
I hate that Sulu's not here.
Priority 1 distress call. It says absolutely peaceful.
What is going on?
Space Station K7, this is Captain Kirk of the Enterprise. What is your emergency?
Captain Kirk, and this is Mr. Lurie, manager of K7.
Here in my pockets.
Oh, what is it? Is it alive? May I hold it?
It's a tribble.
Only the sweetest creature known to man. Excepting, of course, your lovely self.
Are you selling them?
That's what we're trying to decide right now.
I didn't think we had money, but okay.
Sir, transporting harmful animals from one planet to another is against regulations, or weren't you aware of that?
He is a motherfucker you do not want to fight, because if he hits once, you're done. This guy's got a little Jackie Gleason in him. That was a great fight.
Small disturbance between the Klingon crew and members of the...
Hey, minor disturbance.
I am forced to cancel shore leave for both ships. I want to know who started it.
Listen up, you sons of bitches. Who didn't invite me?
I don't know, sir.
I love it. Don't know.
I know you. Who threw the first punch, Scotty?
It was me.
I did, Captain.
You did, Mr. Scott?
And you didn't invite me? Montgomery, the fuck?
They insulted us, sir.
Must have been some insult.
Aye, it was.
Tell them they insulted the Enterprise.
The Klingons say, is this off the record?
No, this is not off the record.
It is not.
No, sir.
Yes. It wasn't until they insulted the Enterprise.
And I didn't see that it was worth fighting about.
My honor?
What was it they said that started the fight?
They called the Enterprise a garbage scow.
That's when you hit the Klingon.
Yes.
Jim, you've got to understand that.
All right, Scotty. Dismissed.
You'd have done the same thing, Jim. Come on.
Restricted to quarters until further notice.
Thank you, sir. That'll give me a chance to catch up on my technical journals.
Meanwhile, in the sickbay maternity ward,
They're nice, they're soft, and they're furry, and
I'm done with this shit. Let's pick all this shit up, put it all in Ahora's room.
well, the nearest thing I can figure out is that they're born pregnant.
Wow.
Been running computations on their rate of reproduction. The figures are taking an alarming direction.
Well, Cyrano Jones says that a tribble is the only love that money can buy.
Is that the big guy, Cyrano Jones? Oh, shit. I remember him from the animated series. That's how I know about him. Okay.
Get these tribbles off the bridge.
Jim is at the end of his rope. Klingons, tribbles, what's his name, Barris down there.
Into an environment where their natural multiplicative proclivities would have no restraining factors.
Well, of course. What did you say?
We're going to raise him from... Oh, asteroids. Okay, cool.
But he is after my grain.
Do you have any proof of that?
You can't deny he's disrupted this station.
That's a hell of a leap, though, dude.
Disrupting a space station is not an offense. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a ship to tend to. Au revoir.
Au revoir. Jim has had his bullshit tolerance level is surpassed. He's done. He's fucking done. Oh, we haven't seen the cafeteria in a while. Well, I guess we are raising them for meat.
Aye, they're into the machinery, all right.
They're in the machinery.
There are vents of that type on the space station.
And in the storage compartments.
They're eating the grain. Everybody get your shit about you. Yeah, they're soft. Yeah, they purr. God, kick them off the pad or you're going to be like Brundle Tribble Fly. I wish we would have kept Garovic. I really like that kid. He'd have been a great red shirt to see every once in a while. I like this. I shouldn't. I love Jim. He's my guy. But he is so fucking frustrated. I love it. Look at my guy's face. He is so, this is like...
Gorged. On my...
Why don't you help us out?
Remarkable.
Hold on a minute.
Is my guy a Klingon in the gray suit?
But they do like Vulcans. Why, Mr. Spock, I didn't know you had it in you.
Obviously, tribbles are very perceptive creatures, Captain.
Spock is the best. So why are they going ape shit around? But they don't like you, buddy.
They don't like you, Mr. Darvin. I wonder why.
Mr. Darvin, give me a scan. He's Klingon.
His body temperature is... Jim, this man is a Klingon.
Klingon.
You brought a Klingon agent?
What about the grain?
Scotty did it.
What'd you do, Scotty?
Based on computer analysis, of course. Taking into account the possibility...
They are passing the buck. Where are they?
Well, it was Mr. Scott who performed the actual engineering.
Mr. Scott,
Who did what?
I used the transporter, Captain.
You use the transporter?
Aye.
And? To space?
Captain Kirk, that'd be it.
Good leave line. All right, everybody, we just got done watching Star Trek, the original series, Season 2, Episode 15, the iconic The Trouble with Tribbles. And the only thing left to do is talk about it. All right, everybody, we just got done watching Star Trek, the original series, Season 2, Episode 15, The Trouble with Tribbles. Okay, yeah, so it was a tongue-in-cheek kind of funny episode, but it had a good story to it. I like the Klingon. I like the Klingon, influence that was in there. They were kind of like the red herring catalyst of the story, which was awesome. Plus, we got to see Trelane come in again. And okay, again, I know it's not Trelane, and I forget the actor's name who played Trelane, but just never going to not think that was Trelane as a Klingon. Great stuff. Plus, I think Bill Shatner, everybody, Bill Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, Jimmy Doohan, everybody was really kind of on their A game with just the long comedic pauses, especially Bill Shatner. I think that this was a really good example of Shatner stage acting coming back into play here because he had the option in a lot of these scenes to deploy his just long, I'm not going to answer you, read my eyes looks that were so hilarious to me. People trying to excuse themselves or kind of make some type of explanation for what's going on. And Kirk would just sit there and stare. He was so pissed. He was so pissed throughout the majority of this episode. He was catching it from the moment we started this episode until the very end when he laughed. And you realize he was like, oh, thank God, it's over. Ha ha ha, it's done. He had a really rough couple days. He was just getting shit on, weren't high enough where comedy would have ruined it. You can say, well, the Sherman's Planet thing was, the stakes were very high. Yes, but there was a plot to already take out the people on Sherman's Planet. And the Tribbles uncovered it, and so it was a really kind of serendipitous type of moment where we had the Tribble problem, thanks to Cyrano Jones, that also uncovered the real problem, the really nefarious problem that would have resulted in however many colonists starving to death with that virus thing that the grain was carrying. Really, really cool shit. One of my favorite parts was when they were like, oh, yeah, we don't expect anybody to understand this grains. And Spock goes into a textbook definition of what this shit is. I've said it once, I'll say it a million times. When you absolutely, positively need to have the very best officer that Starfleet has ever produced, Spock. You accept no substitute. He is the best apex predator of all other Starfleet officers. Unreal shit. I absolutely adore Spock's character. I think he is the best. He does such, Leonard Nimoy, oh my God. Nimoy does such a great job just basically, playing to the very fucking edge of what would be considered an emotional response. He's and as we've been with him more, as I've been with him more, and the audience has been with him more, we can see his sarcasm. We can see his humor. We can see the insults. We can see just, when he's being passive aggressive. We can see when he's being confrontational. And at no point, if we would have had those lines, for me, if I would have had those lines delivered the exact same way earlier in season 1, I would have dismissed it. I wouldn't have read it as necessarily, was that sarcastic? Oh, it didn't look like it, Now we know we don't need to, it's being able to really read the performance that Nimoy is giving, and it's exceptional. It's so good to watch him really cook. I love watching Nimoy cook, and this was a fun episode. This is one where they didn't have to really get into too terrible much. And it was really good. DeForest Kelley did a great job. We had some great moments with Uhura. I thought that her whole explanation and immediate love of the Tribbles was something that really could have been given to any crew member. They only needed a crew member to introduce it to the Enterprise. But I think that Nichelle Nichols did such a great job with it, and kind of made it playful and made it this interesting event to have these little creatures on the Enterprise, and made it so organic as to how they got on there. It was really a cool idea. This episode, I would say more so, and I never think a couple episodes have been really loose. I think like an alternative factor, but that's kind of that's the catch-all for bad things is alternative factor. But, this one more so than a lot of them was very tightly storyboarded. We had definite moving. Every place we went to was necessary for the continuation of the story. Even the bar fight was a red herring. It was again to kind of reinforce that the Klingons were the problem here, and the Klingons were going to be a real nuisance if we didn't address them specifically. That's, you throw them in there to insult Kirk and insult Starfleet, insult the Enterprise, and it fires everybody up, and it raises tensions and raises stakes. And of course, the Klingons were the problem, so to speak, in that, the Klingon agent who was Devram, what was that guy's name? Darwin, was Darwin who, but I honestly, I'm not sure. I'm sure they did that, the Trelane Klingon and Darwin knew one another. And so it was all, a big kind of ruse and subterfuge and a big plot and whatnot. But again, it never rose to the stakes of like intergalactic moment, where it was, this is a razor's edge decision, like Balance of Terror, where we're going to go one way in war or in peace. And this one just seemed to be kind of like on the front lines It was like people throwing insults and jokes back at one another. You know, and there was a lightheartedness to this kind of confrontation, and it never really kind of moved into the dire. It could have. They could have moved it into the dire, but I think because they were able to use the Tribble storyline to kind of diffuse the seriousness of the situation, it always seemed light. It always seemed lighthearted. That why we got the great moments with Jim just being fucking complete. He had zero fucks left. He had nothing to give. He was so pissed. I just love it. And you know what? Jim never usually loses his shit. And he didn't in this episode, lost his shit, but he got close. Barris was, you know, insufferable, and he had to sit there and take it. And a couple times I saw Bill Shatner, not Jim Kirk, Bill Shatner jump his line a couple times to try to like interrupt Barris, and Barris's actor just continued to go straight through his, you know, his established lines. He wouldn't let Shatner kind of interject, and that was when Shatner was covered in the dead Tribble pile, I guess, at that time. You know, but it was really cool because there's twice that I saw that Shatner like jumped a line or stepped on a line, and the actor that was playing Barris just fucking kept going, which I think is great because there's two ways to go with that. If you were the actor delivering the line and someone jumps your line, you either have to make it look like the interruption was part of everything by barreling through, because if you stop, then you're looking for an active response from the person. And if they jump the line that necessarily wasn't the line that they were supposed to react or deliver off of, you've got to, you know, you're going to lose a lot of narrative there because there might have been a question or a point or a plot point that was cut out. And so, you know, it happens a lot in stage work that whenever, you know, someone jumps the line, normally you barrel fucking through it if you know there's a plot point that needs to come with one of your next sentences or one of your next lines. And so I like that. I like that. That's why it kind of reminded me a lot of the stage in that, you know, if they were organized or designed interruptions, then that's exceptionally good because it looked like they were just line steps. Good stuff. I think that this is the type of episode. I'd be very surprised when I do Q&A if this was the type of episode that had problems behind the scenes, because it looked like a fun episode and it came off like a fun episode and it was storyboarded and it was tight. And it's Joseph Pevney. So Pevney's not going to let things linger or drift or whatnot. He seems to be very regimented, very like a time manager, and he's able to get these shots and everything in on time. And this was a ambitious shoot, I would suspect, because we have numerous different locales: the Enterprise, the cafeteria, sick bay, the station, you know, the grain corridor. We had the inner workings of the couple of shots from inside the hallways of the ship. You know, a lot of different locales for shooting. Pevney doesn't shy away from that shit. I absolutely love it. But friends, we got a ton to ask and a ton to find out. And I mentioned Q&A, so now it's time for us to hit Q&A. But, you know, I wonder, I just seem like I saw somebody recently. That was a Klingon, though. It couldn't possibly be anybody we ever knew, right? Anyway, let's talk to Q. Q will sort all this out, right, Q? 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 Trelane? Oh, greetings and salutations, Captain. It is I for Trelane and A. General Trelane, retired. Friends, this is where, after having watched and reacted to an original series episode, I like to dig a little bit deeper behind the scenes to figure out what went on behind the cameras, because as we've always said, the story behind the cameras is usually just as good as the story in front of the cameras. But to keep myself from wandering off into the weeds and talking for several hours, I've given myself 5 distinct categories in which to explore. The first, writer and director. Who were they? The second, guest stars. Did we have any? The third, of the core cast, or the big 8, who appeared. The fourth, and the spiciest of the categories, the production notes. What really went on behind the cameras of this episode of Star Trek: The Original Series. And last but certainly not least, category 5, a memorable quote from this episode. Let's get started. Now for our first category, my friends, writer and director. Who were they? Well, the writer for this episode, and I hope I get the last name right, was David Gerrold. Could be Gerald, Gerrold. Great job. A very comedic, very funny episode that I thought hit really, really well. And directed by none other than Star Trek mainstay and Mount Rushmore of directors, you have to say it at this point, Joseph Pevney. Friends, Let's move on. All right, friends, and for our next category, guest stars. Who did we have in this one? Well, we had several guest stars in this one, and one we've seen before in another role, but we'll get into that in a second. The first guest star was William, and I hope I get this one right, Shallert, William Shallert as Barris. I thought he was great. I thought he played a perfect prick. That's tough to pull off too, but he did a very, very good job. Of course, we had Stanley Adams as Cyrano Jones, somebody that I saw or heard for a second time when I did my brief stint of the animated series before I stopped when I realized I was going to ruin some things for myself. But I did do this one, which I think it was like more Trouble, More Tribbles or something like that, where he reprises his role, I believe, as Cyrano Jones, who appears in that episode of the animated series. We also had Whit Bissell as Lurie. And finally, last but certainly not least, we had William Campbell as Trelane. Yes, I know he played Koloth, but for me, he will always be a disguised Trelane. That's my headcanon. You can't change my mind. Let's move on. Now, for our third category of the core cast, or the Big Eight who appeared. Well, who are the Big Eight? The Big Eight are Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Sulu, Scotty, Uhura, and for season 2, we added Nurse Chapel and we added Chekhov. Nurse Chapel appeared in season 1, but became more prominent at the beginning of season 2, so I added her. Strangely enough, in this one, no Sulu, no Chapel. So Nurse Chapel was not available, and Sulu was probably, George Takei was off filming the Green Berets with John Wayne at this point, so a lot of season 2, as you all have told me, has been missed because of that prior commitment. Friends, let's move on. And now for our next category, friends, which is production notes. And this was a big one because there's a lot of really fun stuff inside Trouble with Tribbles. So I wanted to make sure we got a lot of flavor that came out with all of this. And one of my favorite episodes, or one of my favorite parts of this is the one I thought I would start with. This is a quote, or kind of I'll paraphrase basically what Christopher Doohan said, son of James Doohan, Scotty. He said that whenever he would be, his dad sometimes had to bring them to set, and Jimmy Doohan would take the boys, both Christopher and his brother Montgomery. He would take both of them and put them into the shuttle and say, "Boys, stay put." And then he would go away. Well, one of the days in which they did that was the day in which they were filming Trouble with Tribbles. So as boys would often want to do on a movie set on a TV show set of Star Trek, which had to be absolutely mind-bending to see these people walking around and all this stuff, especially as young kids thinking, oh my God, this place is so cool. So they snuck out of the shuttle. Of course they did, right? And so they went into one of the prop rooms and they saw all these great things. And there was these 3 huge lockers that were filled up. And for some reason, Christopher Doohan says he's not really sure with all the other props out why he and his brother decided to open up one of those lockers. I guess it was just the mystery of the unknown. As they opened it up, 200 tribbles came pouring out, a la the scene that we saw with William Shatner getting buried in tribbles. But the boys opened it up and they said that the tribbles just poured out like a wave. They were incredibly upset. They didn't know what to do. Nobody had seen them, so they rushed back to the shuttle. When they got back to the shuttle, they stayed put. Their dad showed up 15 minutes later and praised them for being good lads and staying put and not getting into trouble. That's part of the story, my friends. 30 years later, Christopher Doohan jokingly told his dad, "Oh, remember that day we were over there and you were doing the Tribble episode on Star Trek? Yeah, Montgomery and I snuck out and we went over and opened up a locker and all these things fell out on us." And James Doohan got pissed. He got mad. He got upset. He was mortified that they had done that 30 years later. Great story, fantastic stuff. Let's move on. Now for our next production note, friends, we had the aforementioned, we just spoke of Jimmy Doohan's kids getting buried in tribbles. Well, that iconic scene where Kirk opens up the bin and all the tribbles spill out on him, and then he's like, he's chest deep in the tribbles and they keep coming out of the bin. The greatest part about that is the prop guys that were on the other side of the wall had no line of sight to Kirk or the scene as it was playing out. And they were told, under no circumstance do you stop pouring tribbles out of this chute. And so the prop guys that were in the back said, okay, all right, we'll do it. That's why whenever Shatner is sitting there and they keep pouring out, there's one moment where Bill Shatner looks up at the chute and then looks through, like, at the wall. That's him looking at the prop guys like, guys, what are you doing? Enough with this stuff. But the thing is, they were told that there is no such thing as enough. And so they were cycling those tribbles in, and to the point where they had bins that they were putting in, and then they were loosely throwing the remainders that had kind of spilled out of the bins through. That's why you would get like one single tribble at a time coming through. Great, great stuff. And the irritation that was on Bill Shatner's face, according to These Are the Voyages, the irritation was genuine because Bill Shatner, when asked why he looked so irritated in the scene at a later date, he said, believe it or not, getting stuffed animals dumped on you about 17 times gets old. This is a great episode no matter what, friends. Let's move on. Now, for our next production note, and again, this is if you ever have any doubts that Spock is in fact infallible, or not infallible, but damn near perfect, Spock's estimate of how many tribbles there are in 3 days, dead or alive, is spot on, given the math that he explains, where he says that if you've got a tribble and the normal litter is 10, and he goes through all of that. If you take that and you build it out for the 3 days in which, this exponential kind of reproduction would occur, you would end up with exactly 1,771,561. As always, much like his internal clock, Spock, when it comes to math, yeah, he doesn't miss. Let's move on. Okay, and for our next production note, friends, according to David Gerrold, who is Gerrold, however you pronounce his last name, the writer of this episode, who also went on to write The World of Star Trek, he said that the best thing about this episode was they had so many tribbles. I think they had a grand total of 500 that were made, various sizes. They were made with like carpets and like loose fur and stuff like that. The person that made all 500 of them too was paid $350. I guess that seems like a lot of work, but I digress. That was a bit of a tangent. But he, in the making of Star Trek, or the World of Star Trek, he said they were finding tribbles months after the filming of The Trouble with Tribbles. They would open up a compartment and 2 tribbles would roll out, because apparently whenever the set was dressed for the tribbles, that the people that were dressing the set and the prop department guys were told, hide these in places that are normally opened up. So if we have somebody in the background opening up something or pulling out an access panel, tribbles would fall out. Well, they did that, and they hit them in every conceivable access point, just to be sure. So there were several scenes in future episodes that had to be reshot because they'd open up a panel and tribbles would fall out, and they'd be like, well, son of a bitch. I think it's great. Those suckers, even though they weren't really alive, were everywhere. Let's move on. And now for my last one, I had to go with my guy, William Campbell here. Trelane is one of my all-time favorite TOS characters. I absolutely adore him. I absolutely adore William Campbell, who by all reports, and I really kind of dove a little bit into William Campbell because I love the energy that he brought, both to Koloth and of course to Trelane. Really, really good guy. And so I wanted to end with this particular note, which I think, because I've read in so many places how much he loved being on set, how much he loved Star Trek, and how much everybody there really, really dug him, how he was just a really good guy. So I thought I would end with this particular note. William Campbell, Trelane, took some of the 500 tribbles home. Do you think for mementos, or, he wanted to have a little bit, to remind him of the great episode he was in? No. He took about 40 of them with him and handed them out to the neighborhood children so they would have their very own tribbles. Great stuff. Friends, let's move on. And last but certainly not least, my friends, the memorable quote from this episode, and is an exchange between Barris and Kirk. Barris begins by saying, "In my opinion, you have taken this important project far too lightly." To which Kirk responds, "On the contrary, sir, I think of this project as very important. It is you I take lightly." Thus ends another installment of Trelane and A. Until we see each other again, my friends, behave.